Okay, everybody, welcome to this masterclass on the unified theory of everything people. For those of you who just join anything that people put a Zoom link in front of you, here's what's happening. We have 90 minutes scheduled today. We are in fact recording so I saw a couple people who said they have to, pop out at the hour or whatnot. So we will record the last of it for you. And like all of our workshops, this is sort of a mix of both education and then hands-on practice. So if you haven't had a chance to test your video and say hi, we will give you many opportunities to do that. We are today blessed and wonderfully excited to be featuring Kim Seeling Smith from Ignite Global. She has put together a class that we have host on Meeting School. It's one of our more effective, wonderful classes, and she will be showing highlights from that today. So we'll be going through the top level theory and then doing some of the exercises together as a group. Our purpose is really to learn what works in attracting and retaining top talent. And then because this is meeting school and we are about meetings, we will be diving into one of the critical skills you need for keeping and retaining and motivating top talent, and that is the one-on-one meeting. So with that, chat is open. You are free to chat away on topic, cameras on as you want, mute and unmute with respect so we can keep background background noise to a minimum. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kim. Thank you so much, Kim, for joining us on this.
Thank you, Elise, and I am thrilled to be here. As you can tell by my accent, I was raised in the United States, but if you could see the windows behind my green screen, you would know that it is in the dark of night. Well, not quite the dark of night. It's a little bit early morning because I'm living in Sydney, Australia. So back in the olden days when we could travel, I used to split my time between the US and Australia. But I've been in Australia since we first went into lockdown last year and have not left since because I can't. But that's fine with me because things are pretty good here. But what I want to talk about today, as Elise said, is the unified theory of everything people. So instead of sharing my slides, I'm going to be in the corner of my slides. So if you could keep me on speaker view, you'll be able to see the slide and me up in the little corner looking down. And that's how I'll be going through the presentation today. So we will have loads of time for interaction through the chat box, through polls, through you unmuting yourself and talking. We'll be going into some breakout rooms and going through some of what we're going to be talking about and really looking at it from a practical standpoint. But in essence, what I want to do today is I want to help you avoid your Kodak moment. Now, how many of you remember that Kodak advertisement campaign from the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, where Kodak really encouraged you to savor the moments that you wanted to capture using their Kodak film? That is not the Kodak moment that I want to help you avoid. The Kodak moment that I want to help you avoid was the moment in January 2012 when Kodak actually went from having an 80% share of the market in the United States and 50% globally to going bankrupt in 2012. Kodak was disrupted and Kodak did not see it coming. And no, Kodak was not disrupted because of digital technology. Kodak actually had the first digital camera and had spent billions in R&D. Kodak was actually disrupted because they misread their customer desires. So we're going to talk a little bit about disruption today because COVID-19 is hopefully going to be the most significant disruption of this decade, but it certainly will not be the last, not according to the futurists, the economists, and demographers amongst us. As a matter of fact, my sister works for Accenture in Chicago. We've got a couple of people from Illinois on the call. My sister works for Accenture as a consultant, and she was in a meeting recently where one of the partners says that Accenture estimates that on a global scale, organizations on average have leapfrogged in terms of their technology implementation by about 5 years. So they're 5 years ahead of where they thought they would be in the beginning of 2021. Now that has all sorts of ramifications. That has ramifications on the workforce. How we do what we do is changing more rapidly than we'd anticipated. The instances of our jobs being augmented or automated through technology, that is obviously changing. And how we serve the customer, the things that we've learned to do, to pivot, to innovate, to change things up, to secure our supply chain. We have had to reimagine a lot of what we do since COVID struck us a year ago. The next thing, and if you haven't already started, and I know many of you on this call have, the next thing that we need to reimagine is old school people practices, because the people practices, the way that we hire and retain staff, those practices were built in a very different time, in a very different age, for a very different workforce. A lot of our people practices were built for people who did very routine, tactical, and predictable work, just very, very work with a lot of boundaries on that didn't require a lot of thought, a lot of innovation. So I want to ask you a question. What are some of the practices in your organization that you suspect you might be holding on to that are out of date? So I'd love to see the chat to see what you guys have to say in that. So keep them coming, and I'm going to look over here. I've got 3 computer screens on my desk this morning, one to see the chat because I can't see the chat in the others. So what are some of the people practices? And if you'd feel comfortable unmuting yourself, please feel free, unmute yourself and talk to us. Annual reviews, oh, my favorite. Yes, indeed. And part of what I'm going to share in the Unified Theory of Everything People will help you enhance or replace those annual reviews. Peer reviews, meetings, avoidance. Yeah, oh, now they're coming in fast and safe. Presenteeism, yes, butts in seats. You must be in your seat to be productive. How is that working out in a hybrid or a remote workforce? Recruitment, performance management, having communications spread across 5 systems, holding people to a 9-to-5 worksheet, spreadsheets, first in, last out. Great. Excellent. Excellent. Triangulated conversations, person after my own heart, time-based as opposed to outcome-based performance. We're going to talk about that first, as a matter of fact. Multiple communication systems. Somebody defending spreadsheets, taking advantage of people's willingness to go above and beyond. Excellent. Oh, now we're going into a spreadsheet rumble here. Okay, some really, really, really good practices. And yes, not a surprise. A lot of these are old school people practices. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to be pulling back the curtain to reveal a model, a holistic model that I call the Unified Theory of Everything People, that will give you some very practical things to do to update some of those old school people practices around sourcing, selecting, hiring, and engaging. This is, we're going to put some special emphasis on the one-to-one check-ins, as Elise said, but I'm going to be covering the entire model from hiring to, I like to say hiring the right people and then keeping them once you have them. So we're going to be talking about that. I want to first talk a little bit about the research behind, if you've seen me before, and I'm not sure that I do know of anybody on the call, but a lot of people will see me speak in other venues. So if you have seen me before, you know that I love to mix a combination of left brain stats and case studies and research with stories. And that's very much what today is going to be about, as well as interaction from you. So let me start with some stats. Now, this is an interesting one because I read this about 6 months ago and I went, oh my gosh, this was mind blowing. And then I promptly lost it. I didn't save the link like I normally do, but I found it day before yesterday, so I can share it with you. This is a leadership IQ stat that was a result of a research study that they did a few years ago with 32,000 people worldwide. And what they were looking for is the optimum hours that people spend with their boss, the optimum hours that high performing people spend with their managers. And this, I bet, is going to floor you because it floored me. The optimum number is 6. 6 hours per week between manager and direct report. Now that is not one-on-one necessarily, so don't break into a cold sweat during this. But it's 6 hours of interaction, meaning 6 hours of interacting in meetings, of one-to-one time, certainly, but also of email exchanges. Now, 6 hours seems to be the optimum. Any more than 6, you bleed into micromanagement land. Any less than 6, and they feel like they're not getting enough to be fully productive and to perform at their best. So 6 hours. Get a load of these stats, though. These are incredible. People who spend 6 hours per week interacting with their leader are 29% more inspired, 30% more engaged, 16% more innovative, and who doesn't want an innovative staff right now? 15% more intrinsically motivated than people who only spend 1 hour a week with their leader. And this is just another in the treasure trove of stats that I have that show why monthly one-to-one check-ins with your team are absolutely critical. I'm going to share 2 more with you, and then we'll get out of stats land and we'll move into some digging into some other things. So many of you on the call will be familiar with this. It's an older stat, but it's something that the Gallup organization talks about frequently. This is a Gallup stat. 70% of the variance in employee engagement scores is down to the manager. 70% of the variance is caused by the manager. Now, the Gallup organization, for those of you who aren't familiar with their research, they have the largest data set on the planet of everything human capital. They have so much evidence to back up this stat that they wrote an entire book about it called It's the Manager, and they published that in 2019. One more to bring this home. Harvard Business Review wrote up a study that was done by the Navalent Corporation back in 2016. The Navalent Corporation had spent 10 years studying what great chief executives do. And they identified 4 key patterns for every great chief executive. But they said the 4th is actually the most important. And that is that they form deep connections with all their stakeholders, superiors, peers, and especially their direct report, studying and meeting the needs of those direct reports. And when I read that, I went, 2 things stand out for me. First of all, I think that not only is this key for great executives, I think it's key for all leaders because communication is so important. And the second thing that I went is, that's really interesting. Studying and meeting the needs of their direct report. This, in my 25 years experience, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my background here in a second, but I've been a consultant in one way, shape, or form for over 25 years now. This is one of the areas that I see most that there's confusion around and frustration. Oh my God, what do my staff need? What do they need to perform at the level that I know they can perform at? What do they need to be, to feel good about their job? What do they need for mental well-being? And key critical issue these days. Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? I've got a cheat sheet for you on that. So I'm going to be sharing that with you at the end. So hold on for that spoiler when I share that. But I've got the secret around what your staff needs to be fully productive and profitable. Now, because managers are so frustrated and so confused about what they need, most managers don't talk to their staff enough about the right things or in the right ways. So again, time for you to employ those fingers in the chat box. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that managers don't spend enough time speaking to their direct reports? So let's hear that from everybody. What's going on with that? Too busy. They don't know what to say. Too many meetings. Fear. Yes, good one. Compounding priorities. No time. Avoidance. Absolutely. Yep. Inexperienced. Yes. Haven't done it in forever. Managers aren't always people. Yes. They don't view it as a priority. Relying on middle management to do. Yeah, that old chestnut. Don't know the questions to ask. Complications of a unionized agreement. Oh, good one. Not included in their job description. Yes. Too much in the weeds. Yes. They prioritize their day job over their teams. Absolutely. All of those are exactly what I hear from not only every audience that I speak to, but every company that I work with, all of those. So let me take a little time machine trip with you, if you will. So we're sort of a time machine group because I'm in Sydney at 6 o'clock in the morning. We've got somebody in Hawaii at 9 o'clock at night on a different day entirely. So this is a good group to step into a time machine with. So I'm going to take you on a short little trip of leadership through the ages. So think about those old school people practices when they were first developed. When they were first developed, it was back at the turn of the Industrial Revolution. And they were developed for a workforce that was doing very routine things. First on the factory floor. So they brought in farm kids. They taught them to do a very menial task, and they taught them to do it well and fast. If you're familiar with Frederick Taylor, you know what I'm talking about. And then it moved on to the next. Well, we replicated that in the white collar world as well. And in order to manage a workforce like that, we needed compliance first above everything. So we had managers who managed and minions who did. And then we replicated that in the white collar workforce because it worked so well. And it did work well for a number of years while we had the workforce that we had, a fairly uneducated workforce, doing fairly routine work that didn't require a lot of cognitive ability. So in the white collar world, managers managed and doers did. Managers sat in their corner office and managed. However, what happened then? In the 1980s and 1990s, we went through, regardless of where you are in the world, a tremendous cost-cutting exercise. And we virtually eliminated one entire layer of middle managers. And as a result of that, managers had to manage and do. And so for the last 30 years, going on 40 years, we have had this environment where we put a lot of responsibility on our managers. We give them a day job and then we say, manage staff. And who do you think they prioritize? Their day job or managing staff? Most managers have prioritized their day job. And as a result, it's killing our workforce. It is literally killing our workforce because the lack of support for managers means that if managers can impact employee engagement surveys by 70%, employee engagement results by 70%, that means that the lack of support by managers is a direct causality for the fact that globally our workforce is up to 85% disengaged. Now that means passively engaged to actively disengaged, 85%. It's been that way for over a decade. I started my business Ignite Global in 2009, and it has been that way as long as I've been doing research around that. So a couple of polls that we want to launch. We've got 85% disengagement globally. The first question that I have is, what percentage of annual salary do we lose for every one of your employees that is passively engaged to actively disengaged? What percent of your annual salary, of their annual salary, do you lose in low productivity? Let's see how we go, Elise. And I can see that the poll is up. So go ahead and take your best guess.
So we are about 2/3
Some of you will have seen this stat before. This is also a Gallup stat. It's a Gallup stat. It's about 10 years old now, but it hasn't been updated because it hasn't needed to, from what I understand.
Okay, we're going to close this poll in 5.
I had the good fortune of being able to meet Jim Clifton, who runs the Gallup organization, a couple of years ago. He was here in Sydney. And I talked to him not only about his research, but about his employee engagement. Okay, what's our, this is the advanced crowd. At least you didn't tell me that I was speaking to the advanced crowd. Yes, you are dead right. 53% said 33%, up to a third of somebody's annual salary is lost in low productivity. Now, let's talk about if they're really unengaged, disengaged, what will they do? They'll walk out the door. So how much in terms of a percentage of their annual salary, how much does it cost to replace somebody? So second poll question, how much does it cost to replace somebody in terms of their annual salary? And this is a little bit of a trick question, and I'll share the results with you as to why it's a trick question here in a second. How much in terms of somebody's annual salary does it cost? Now, this is both hard costs and soft costs. So the hard costs are the cost of placing the ad, the recruiter's fees, things like that. The soft costs are training costs, time out of the business, the morale that's hit, the customers that might walk away as a result of a broken relationship. So think about hard costs and soft costs. What do
Okay,
we,
so let's
what
close
do we
this up
think
in
that it costs for
5,
somebody
4,
to walk away?
3, 2, and 1.
How are we going? Do we have the majority? Yeah, looks like. Again, the advanced class. Yes. And some of you got the trick question. So yes, conventional wisdom, the Gallup organization has been saying, well, and in fact, it's not only Gallup, it's a number of organizations say that it costs between 50 to 200% of somebody's annual salary to replace them. And Gallup came out about 4 years ago and said, with all of the people that we are now employing with very specialized skill sets. So I work a lot in the engineering space. I don't know why. I'm not an engineer. Don't even play one on TV. But I work a lot in the engineering space, my team and I. And there's an astrophysical engineer that is like hen's teeth to find. And for some reason, a lot of them are in Malaysia, or a lot of need is in Malaysia. For somebody like that with a very specialized skill set, or somebody with very strong customer relationship, you find that that's up to 300% to replace somebody. So it costs a lot of money. So thank you, Elise. And as you can see, with as much money as it's causing for us to not support our teams as much as we need to, we're starting to recognize that. And we're seeing the pendulum swinging back. We're seeing more emphasis being placed on our managers really supporting the team. So this is how we reimagine our old school people practices. We need to, especially in this decade of disruption, we need to be able to build and retain a disruption-proof workforce. So the old ways of hiring and managing that were developed for that industrial age workforce just no longer cut it. So let's get into the unified theory. And I'm going to tell this story through the lens of a case study. That's probably my poster child for this entire framework. It's a company that's called First Mortgage Systems. It's an Australian-based company, but it's owned by First American Title, which many of you would know. So First Mortgage Systems, when I began working with them about 6 or 7 years ago now, they had a 45% turnover rate. So we've seen the numbers. You can tell what the bottom line impact of that was. So before I get started, let me tell you a little bit more about my background. As I've mentioned before, I grew up in Wisconsin, actually. I grew up in the United States, and I was working for Robert Half International when I got the opportunity to move to New Zealand. I actually built the Robert Half brand in New Zealand. And if you've ever been to New Zealand, you might recognize the fact that it's a little cold, which is a little bit surprising to me, especially because they don't heat their houses and it rains a lot. So I decided to move to Sydney to start this business in 2008. And I launched this business in 2009. So we have a company called Ignite Global. We work across the world, but primarily in the US and Australia. And I do a lot of keynote speaking, conference breakout sessions, and I appear on media around the future of work. So everything that I do, everything that my team does is future focused. I'm involved in a couple of really cool initiatives, one of which literally gives me a seat at the table with Richard Branson. That's the 100% Human at Work initiative. And I don't show that picture to brag. I show that picture because being involved with 100% Human and having a seat at the table gives me access to some of the most innovative companies around the people space. So I share and I'm constantly updating best practices. We've worked across 32 different industries in 9 different countries now and do a lot virtually as many companies do. And I'm loving life because I can do it from 7 minutes from my house. So I'm going to be giving you a lot of value. And there are going to be some additional free gifts in addition to the slides and the copies of the currencies of choice that you have at the back of your handout. I'm going to be giving you a couple of other things. So take notes. You are going to have a recording, but it will help you remember if you take notes. So the unified theory of everything people, let's jump into this. Like we said before, the old school people practices is based on command and control. Now, everybody on this call, I'm sure knows that no longer works for today's workforce. Command and control is great for compliance. You do what I say. You get compliance and you get short-term action, but it does not get you long-term change. The main vehicle that's used for compliance is an old school job description, a job description that is chock full of duties and responsibilities that are, can we talk just between us? Boring. Boring as all get out because it doesn't bring the job to life. And it's also ineffective because you know as well as I do that people can do everything on their laundry list of duties and responsibilities and still not succeed in the job. So this is actually the beginning of the unified theory of everything people. We replace those boring old job descriptions with what we call target-rich objectives. You're going to have a chance to see the target-rich objectives and look at them in comparison to your own here in a second. Target-rich objectives are really dead simple. They're 5 or fewer, and I'm talking about putting these on job descriptions, putting these on if you have probationary period plans or induction plans. These are, you set them once and you tweak them every 90 days to really make them relevant and real. But there are 5, no more than 5 or fewer outcomes. So it's an end result of something. It's a tangible item and it can be measured. There's always, if it's a tangible item, what's the thing? It's the report. It's the monthly financial statements. If it's measured, it's got to have a date, a percentage, a number, some sort of thing that you can measure. And it's written in real language. Talk how we talk. Have you ever actually said to anybody in a timely manner? I didn't think so. I certainly haven't. So we talk how we talk. We have 5 or fewer outcomes with measurable results. Now, I want to tie this back to the monthly one-on-ones that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today. And I like to say that the one-to-one check-ins that you have with your staff have to strike the balance between the needs of the organization and the needs of the individual. The pendulum is swinging, and rightly so, because we've been so centered on what's good for the organization. And since 2009, we've seen a lot of movement to purpose-driven organizations and 100% human organizations that allow their employees to bring their whole selves to work. And that's all great, and I support that heartily. But we must not lose fact of the fact that we are in business. Even if we're not for profit, we need to make revenue to fund the people that we fund, the organizations, what's the word that I'm looking for? The people that we fund. We have to make money. So these conversations, these check-ins need to strike the balance between needs of the organization, needs of the individual. The objectives conversation, which are defined by the 5 or fewer outcome-based target-rich objectives, do exactly that. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples. They are in your packet that Elise sent out to you. They're at the very back. There's a slide that you can probably not read, but at the very back, you've got 2 examples. They're real life examples from real life clients that I've helped reshape their job descriptions into what I call success profiles. First is Lindsay Dinan. It's an engineering company. They went from having a very complex, routine, task-based job description to these five, actually four, we've added one since we developed this slide, four outcome-based job descriptions, job target rich objectives. So I'm not going to give you a chance to read it on the slide because we're going to break you out into the breakout rooms here in a second. The next one is for a sales organization. Now, sales people are dead easy to write target rich objectives with because they're measured by their numbers. So at the back of your packet, you have a larger version of both of these so that you can read them. What we're going to do now is we're going to break you into breakout rooms, and you're going to have 10 minutes. So they're breakout rooms of 3 people. You're going to have 10 minutes to, first of all, read over the target rich objectives for Lindsay Dinan and Software AG, which is a large global software firm. Read them over and then ask yourself critically, do your job objectives, do your goals, KPIs, KRAs, whatever your vernacular is, do they look like that? And if they did, what problems would they solve for your organization? So Elise, are we ready to do breakout rooms?
Okay, everybody, you're all whisked off to your rooms. Enjoy your conversation. Go ahead. Kim, take it away.
Go ahead and unmute yourself. And was anybody able to access the packet and actually look at the examples?
We did not. None of us were able to access the package, and we checked our emails and we hadn't received it beforehand. But the conversation was rather interesting because we pivoted on a couple of things. Number one, discontinuing the practice of reviewing somebody's areas of need of improvement, because if they have areas of need of improvement, they're probably not interested and they're probably not going to get better at it. And secondly, instead, developing their core strengths and capabilities, I think was another thing. And then we also reflected back on the traditional job descriptions, which used to be, I think that many are very tactical, right? You know, you need to do this versus what I like your theory about being more outcome based. Because at the end of the day, especially like in sales, if we want somebody to hit their targets, yes, we want them to have the experience. But the outcome and what we want is, you know, net new logos, right? New customer acquisition, sales, all those kinds of things. Do we really care about the tactical approach of how you get there versus getting there mindful of any, you know, rules and all the guidance and everything else?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Nellie, you are spot on. You are spot on with all of that, and especially with strengths, because we may or may not be talking about this in the next 30 seconds. So well done that. And the outcomes, you get this right, and your lives become so much easier. Let's hear from somebody else. Somebody in another room, what was your conversation like? Anyone else? Anyone else care to play?
We talked about I like the idea of combining some of the task-based, duty-based of the traditional job description with this new, bigger picture, what does success look like kind of thing. It felt if we shift entirely to the success objective-based, people are going to wonder what they do day to day. So yes. It felt like I needed a little bit of both.
Yeah, so great point, Cindy. What my clients typically do then, and this is part of the success profile. So you're possibly familiar with that terminology. Success profiles are not my invention. The framework that I use to put success profiles together, called the Spot On framework, that is my invention. But the theory behind success profiles is that you actually just articulate the outcomes, but you're going to, when you train somebody, you're going to go through how they do what they do. And then once they're trained, then you're going to kind of step out of the way and let them get to what they need to do in the best way they know how. The best way they know how. So there may be a 10-step process that you train them on, but because of their strengths or their experience, they may say, oh, you know what, I can do this in 7 steps, as long as they're not compromising quality, customer service, they're not breaking any rules, any laws, any legislation. So we'll get to that. We'll drill a little bit deeper in that in just a minute. So excellent point. But that does go into the training plan, the how, those steps.
Kim,
yeah.
I find this really interesting right now because because of the business climate and the disruptions that we've had in the various businesses, we are having to reassess the upskilling of our team members, right? Because as our business models shift and pivot, we have to look at our team members and have a very raw discussion is, can they evolve, or do we have to go get net new talent?
Yes.
Or if we do retain some of them, which ones of them will be able to upskill?
Yes. And you're asking yourself the right questions. And if anybody is not asking themselves those questions, they need to start immediately. Prior to the pandemic, as I said, and if you joined us late, Accenture said that globally companies have leapfrogged in terms of technology and implementation by an average of 5 years. So prior to that happening, Korn Ferry came out and said that by the year 2030, that there will be, and I'm testing my memory now, it's going to be, I think, between 4 to 8 million jobs in the US that for which candidates with the right qualifications, skills, and experience won't exist. So, and here in Australia, I remember that number, it's 2.2 million, but I think in the States it was 8 million, 8 million more jobs than candidates, which really lends credibility to the theory that we have to take our staff on the journey with us. We have to understand who is capable of moving into new roles and who is not, who we need to free up their future. So I'm going to talk about that next. So great conversations, guys. Are there any other burning shares about outcome-based objectives before we move on into the next part of it? Going once?
And like our group kind of talked about a couple of things, but one is like letting people know how their work is going to be measured. So they know when something's been accomplished and it's not left up to interpretation.
Yes.
And then there was one also that kind of stood out that was like, you need to, achieve one new customer and then have like one upsell or something like that along those lines, but that it gave people more agency. Like it wasn't so prescriptive of like, this is exactly how you have to do it. It was like, here's the goal. And like, you come up with the strategy to achieve it.
That's dead right. Dead right. That's exactly the intention of it, because in the new workforce, we expect them to think, we expect them to be innovative. So it's really contradictory to say, be innovative, but follow these 10 steps.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do, Nicole. Excellent. It's all about giving them autonomy. The other thing that I want to mention very quickly, I didn't build this slide in, but as long as it was brought up, there's a researcher called Greg McKeown. He wrote a book, he's written several books, but this particular case study was written up in a book called Essentialism. Now, Essentialism is a personal productivity book, but he happened to mention one research study that just blew my mind and that I've seen come play out in organizations multiple times since I read this book. What he said is, if you provide clarity and certainty around how success is measured, exactly right, Nicole, how success is measured, that not only do your teams perform better, but they behave better. And he went on to say that the reason that they behave better is because not having that clarity around what they're expected to achieve, not do, people normally, they have an internal desire to want to show their manager that they're doing a good job. So if they don't have something concrete and specific to work towards, they revert into almost childlike behavior. Now, sometimes it is very minor and sometimes it's very major. They'll start throwing their colleagues under the bus and they'll start promoting their own agenda over the teams. So clarity and certainty around outcomes will help not only improve performance, but also behavior. Greg McKeown, Essentialism. Like I said, personal productivity book, excellent book, but great stat. Okay, we're going to move on in the interest of time. So thank you, everyone. Okay, so this is the start of the unified theory of everything people. So let me ask you this. You are now starting to put your job descriptions or success profiles together in this manner, 5 or fewer outcomes with measurable results. In the chat box, let me ask you what you need to screen for in the interview process to make sure that the candidate that you hire has the right attributes to achieve those outcomes. In the chat box, go ahead and tell us what you would screen for. And spoiler alert, we've already talked about it in the discussion that we just had after the breakout. What do we need to screen for in the interview process to make sure? Oops, I'm trying to get to my other screen using the wrong, there we go. Yep. Okay, ability to learn, mental agility, well, very closely related, absolutely key characteristics. See the big picture, not just the details. Focus on what they've actually accomplished. I call that evidence-based interviewing. Yes, we need to focus on their achievements, what they've actually accomplished, actual results for previous similar projects. There's something even more simple. So let me illustrate this by telling you the tale of 2 receptionists. This is a real life story. The tale of 2 receptionists. So as I said before, I do a lot of work with engineering companies, both in Australia and in the US. The company that I developed the Mind Reading for Managers program, which is, as Elise said earlier, which is available on Meeting School. The company that I originally developed that program for back in 2012 is a company called Northrop Consulting Engineers. They're a mid-size engineering firm. Their office is in the heart of Sydney. And they, like a lot of companies, had been having trouble filling the receptionist role. They would hire receptionists with great skills and experience, and they would be terrible. But one day, they shared with me that they were so excited because they found somebody who had come out of a role identical to their own. One of their direct competitors, their receptionist was leaving because she had moved and they were in North Sydney. She wanted to work in the center of the city. So her name was, in fact, I'll change her name. I'll call her Sally to protect the not so innocent. They were so excited. Sally's finally going to help us. She's going to be in the reception role where we finally solved this revolving door problem. In walks I to meet Sally the first time. Well, actually, I was there to meet Jamie, their CEO. But the lift doors open. I walk into the lobby, and there is Sally. And this picture does not do justice to her. And this picture is not Sally, by the way. It's a stock photo. There is Sally laying on her desk. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. Well, surely she'll perk up when she sees me approach. So I approached the desk and no, she looked at me and she goes, can I help you? And I went, well, yes, I'm here to see Jamie Shelton, the CEO. And Sally goes, okay. So she calls Jamie, doesn't even ask my name, doesn't even ask if I have an appointment. Jamie, there's somebody here to see you. Jamie walks out, takes one look at my face. Now, Jamie and I had worked together for about 6 or 7 years by that point in time, knew each other really well. As we walk away from the reception area into the meeting room, Jamie looks at me, looks at the look on my face and says, don't worry, she'll be gone by Thursday. And she was. Sally, again, was on paper exactly what they thought she needed. 5 years in a direct competitor doing exactly the job that they were asking for. Didn't work out. Sally was replaced by a guy by the name of Jay. And this is his real name. And this is his real picture. His name is Jay Tickle. I can't make that up. Jay's now been with Northrop for 5 years. Jay was not a trained receptionist. Far from it. Jay is a trained dancer. When Jay took the reception job at Northrop about 5 years ago, he just needed steady income to support his dancing habit, to support his passion, which was dancing. And he needed a company that would give him steady income and steady hours. So he started working for Northrop. He'd never worked an office job before, but Jay is, no kidding, the best receptionist that I've ever seen. I finally saw him again after lockdown. I didn't go into the office for a year, actually. And I finally saw him again a couple of weeks ago. And I say, Jay, I tell your story all the time. I need a real picture of you, because I was using a stock photo. So Jay sent me his corporate photo, and this is Jay. What makes Jay so good is the first time I met Jay, not only did he greet me with a big smile, he walked out from behind his desk, came over, shook my hand, and he said, Kim, you're here to see Jamie. We've been expecting you. Now, Jamie told me that you wanted to be set up in the Gadigal room, because that's my favorite room. It's got lots of natural light. He said, let me set you up there. Then I'll call Jamie. What kind of coffee do you want? I said, I want a long black. He's never forgotten the fact that I drink a long black in the morning and green tea in the afternoon. When I go there to do training, he's got everything set up like I want. He is absolutely the best receptionist. So what's the difference between Sally and Jay? Sally had all the skills and experience needed. Jay had none. What was the difference? I'm going to reveal it right now. Strengths. Sally did not have the strengths that were needed to be a receptionist. God knows how she lasted 5 years with Northrop's competitor. Jay had the strengths of being a true people person. Jay's also really good at memory. He can remember the coffee order. He more than anything, Jay has this overwhelming desire to support people, not in a subservient way, but how can I help you? And Jay's now been promoted, but he won't leave the reception desk. He loves reception. So even though he is the assistant office manager, he does that from the reception desk because he wants to support people. So hiring people for strengths rather than skills is absolutely key. And that's the second part of the unified theory, also the second part of our spot-on success profile. You'll get a white paper that unpacks all 4 components of the spot-on success profile and goes through with examples of how to do it. But before we leave strengths, what I want to do is I want to share a story, a real life story. One of my really good friends, somebody that I worked with at Robert Half in the Fort Worth office, actually, before I left the US to go to New Zealand. His name is Curtis Ludwig, and he now runs a global team within Ericsson. He and I caught up a couple of years ago, and I was talking to him about this concept of hiring for strengths. And he said, let me tell you, this has saved our bacon. Ericsson hires a lot of data analysts. And I didn't know this actually before talking to Curtis, but a lot of data analysts are male. And they were very, very difficult to come by a couple of years ago, probably still are. So he said, even when we could find them, most of the ones that we could find are male, and they were really killing our diversity and inclusion targets. So we got together as a global recruitment team and said, how do we fix this? And what they decided to do is to hire for strengths. So they went into a room and they whiteboarded all of those strengths or innate abilities that data analysts need. So they said, all right, where can we find people with those strengths that if we put them through a training program, we could hire people and train them to be data analysts? So they did some research. They ended up deciding to hire biologists. And funnily enough, biologists tend to be mostly female. So now, at least 2 years ago, things may have changed, but 2 years ago when I was having this conversation with him, Curtis said that they recruit biologists for the very strengths of being able to sift through a lot of data. They train them on the Ericsson way of doing data analysis and their technology, and they're able to hire enough people and keep them. The training program, tremendously expensive. It's something like 9 weeks of training. It is a big commitment on Ericsson's part. But when he was talking to me, they were starting to do the data. It had actually saved them money because they were reducing their recruitment costs and their turnover costs. So hiring for strengths is absolutely key. But we all know that the ability to do the job is only one part of the equation. We absolutely have to hire the people who are able to fit into the company as well. So I want to ask you again, either unmute yourself or in the chat box, what determines culture fit? And I'm looking for one word. What is one word that determines the alignment between the culture and the individual? So in the chat box. Yes, already. Values, absolutely. Values, though that's equally squishy. Values with the behaviors that underpin what they look like and what they don't look like. So values with behaviors that help you define them. Absolutely right. We need to hire for values. Now, we also need to be able to attract the right people. So hiring for strengths will help you make sure that you hire the people who can do the job. Hiring for values will help you hire people to make sure that they fit in with the organization. But how do you attract those people? How do you magnetically draw them to your organization? By having a compelling purpose. Now, I know a lot of you on this masterclass have done some work around purpose because this is something that is very popular these days. I'm going to share a little secret about purpose, and everybody has seen the Simon Sinek Golden Triangle TED Talk, I'm sure. If you haven't, look at it. It's an excellent TED Talk. Here's what I want to say about purpose. That purpose, a compelling purpose, and this is research-based. Everything that I teach is research-based. Even if I don't quote it, you can guarantee that there's some study or multiple studies that back it up. What the research says is that the most compelling purpose, the massive transformational purpose, actually very much directly communicates how they impact the customer or the community at large. And it needs to be pretty specific. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. One is a small aircraft maintenance company in regional Australia. They're a client of mine. They came up with one of the most brilliant purpose statements I have ever seen in my life, because it absolutely is true. They're an aircraft maintenance organization. We keep people alive by providing world-class maintenance repair operations to airlines. They have tripled in size since developing this purpose. Aircraft maintenance mechanics in Australia are like hen's teeth. They're very, very difficult to find. That purpose transformed their business. The other organization that I like to quote is, I love this one because it runs through my DNA, changing the world through the world of work, inspiring workplaces. So I'm not going to break you out into breakout rooms. If we had more time, I would do that. But I am going to give you a piece of homework. Your homework is to look at your organization's purpose. Is it truly inspiring? Does it directly impact those that you serve? If you're a not-for-profit, your customers, your clients, your whatever you call your members, whatever you call them. If you're a for-profit, does it truly serve your customers or the community at large? Especially if you're attracting people under the age of 30, you've got to have that compelling purpose. And this is post-COVID research. People are being much more discerning about working for purpose organizations. So to wrap up the hiring part of this, we need to attract people with the right purpose and then use a values alignment and a strengths fit to screen out the wrong people. This is what First Mortgage Systems was able to achieve within the first 6 months, 6 or 7 years ago. They brought their employee or turnover rate down from 45 to 30% within 6 months by using the Spot On Success Profile framework, which you'll get a copy of, to hire the right people. So here's a picture of the Spot On Success Profile white paper. You will get a copy of that. Okay, so going back to our model, now that you've hired a human who's inspired by your purpose, aligned with your values, and has the right strengths to achieve those target-rich objectives, your role as a manager is to simply get out of the way. Give them the autonomy that Nicole was talking about with accountability. The accountability are those target-rich objectives. And then you support them when they have trouble. And then cheer them on when they are successful. Going back to what somebody else said, and I can't remember their name, sorry. Going back to what somebody else said, breaking free of that deficit-based performance management system and truly utilizing not only the strengths that you hired them for, but the strengths that they use on the job to help them attain better and better results. The way that we do this, and this comes directly to the monthly one-to-one check-ins, is to structure monthly one-to-ones. Now, going back to the confusion and frustration slide, what do we talk about? How often do we talk about them? I've got a cheat sheet for you. That cheat sheet is called the 9 currencies of choice. So by now, hopefully, everybody has actually looked at their link, gotten access to their link, and they can see the 9 currencies of choice. The 9 currencies of choice are the result of my reverse engineering the 5,000 exit interviews that I did as a recruiter. I spent 15 years working as a recruiter. I personally interviewed 5,000 people. So if you think about it, 5,000 people walked into my office and told me why they wanted to leave their manager. So I'm going to put you in breakout rooms now for just 5 minutes. And what I'd like you to do is take a look at these 9 currencies of choice and tell me what you think might be missing. What don't you see that you might have expected to see? And then we'll bring you back after that.
Okay, friends. And actually, in the interest of time, we're going to put you in there for just 3 minutes. So this is going to be a really short, wonderfully brisk little conversation. Good luck.
I'd love to hear from a couple of people. What did you see?
I'm going to go again, because I think this was really important. My colleague that we were in a separate room, I think in reflection of the past 4 years, the past year, especially the past year with the COVID and all the disruption of businesses and lives and everything else, empathy has become a key word for a lot of people on the work front and the personal side and the community. So, looking for people who have the compassion for human experience, for supporting others, not just looking after themselves, but supporting their colleagues, their peers, their customers.
Yes.
Really wanting to do good, that whole empathy. I think people want to be kinder and gentler.
Yes.
And that's a strength that we need to look for as well.
Absolutely. And this 9 currencies of choice model helps you do that because it helps you focus in on specific things that are important to them. As you'll see in a second, this is the foundation for rich conversations, which will give you the opportunity to drill down many, many layers and get to know your teams much, much more thoroughly.
Yeah, I like that.
Somebody else.
2 things that we discussed that we're not sure if this is just sort of on a parallel track or what. We don't really see much room in here for discussing flexibility at work or comp.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's the one that everybody says, oh, that's missing. That is missing. That is missing because, again, the comp is missing because every research study will tell you that you pay people enough to get the discussion off the table. And then it's those intrinsic motivators. I have absolute treasure troves of anecdotal experience with that through my recruitment career. I saw people walk into my office that were really overpaid according to market value, but miserable in their jobs because these currencies of choice were not being met. Conversely, I saw people that were really underpaid that came begrudgingly into my office because they had to leave their job and they were so happy, but either their spouse was moving or something was going on that they had to leave, but they were so happy because these currencies of choice were ticked off. So you'd pay people enough to take the conversation off the table, and then these currencies of choice really do so much more to drive that intrinsic motivation. In terms of flexibility, it is hidden, but it is there. It's what people need to be inspired to add value and go the extra mile. The underpinnings of that particular currencies of choice, and we drill down much more into that in the Mind Reading for Managers program. It's called self-determination theory. It was made popular by Dan Pink, his autonomy, mastery, and purpose model. That's where that comes from. So let me, in the interest of time, let me just take a couple of minutes to unpack these currencies a little bit further so that you can see where they come from. So these 9 currencies of choice, we'll start with working for a company that they can, a company with a compelling purpose and aligned values. I stumbled over my words there because when I did this digital on-demand program, I re-looked at my 9 currencies of choice, and they used to be 8, but I separated the first 2, and I'm still not, that wording doesn't roll off my tongue. Working for a company with a compelling purpose. So not only does your purpose help you attract the right people, it helps you retain the right people with aligned values. My case study with that is a 17-year-old high school graduate named Tom, who was on a performance improvement program until, this is, the company is Lactalis, which is a cheese manufacturing company based in Boise, Idaho. I was working with them in 2014, and they were able, when they redid their job descriptions into the spot on format, the P in spot on stands for purpose, they were able to turn around Tom, who was a poor performer on a performance improvement program, when they articulated the purpose of his job. He was a sanitation worker. His job was to take apart the equipment, clean it, and put it back together. But when he understood that the purpose was actually to keep his customers healthy and to put a quality product on the dinner table, Tom came in the next day. Every problem that they'd been having with him solved. On time, good attitude, proper PPE. His area started passing inspections, completely turned around. He was still there a year later. So having that purpose can not only attract the right people, but it helps to retain them. The second currency of choice, working for someone that you trust and respect. That is your manager. Again, I talked about the research in the beginning, that trust, that connection between manager and direct report, working with people that they like. We're community-minded people. We're tribal people. We like to work with people that we like. Being appreciated. Now, this is interesting. Praise and appreciation globally is the second most cited employee engagement factor. Here in Australia, where I'm calling from today, it's the first. Praise and appreciation is huge. I'll talk about what the global employee engagement factor is here in a second. Having a voice. We have people, we're hiring smart people. We're hiring people to be innovative. We're hiring people to think for themselves. We need to encourage them to have a voice, to share what's working, what's not working, and what are their good ideas. Knowing how to be successful and how success is measured. We've already talked about that. Those are our target-rich objectives. And yet, 52% of people globally do not understand what they need to achieve and how their success is measured. So we need to build that in. We need to make that clear to increase not only performance, but as we said before, behavior. And to learn, grow, and develop in their career. This, my friends, is the #1 engagement factor worldwide, career development. And that is, again, true after COVID, according to the latest research that I read. And here's another scary stat, right? Management, 37% of people that they interviewed had never had a career development conversation with their manager. That's not only the manager that they currently work for, that's every manager they've ever worked for. So it's the most important thing to talk to our staff about, and yet we're terrible at it. Finally, the second to the last, to be inspired to add value and go the extra mile. Again, the cheat sheet that I use for that is Dan Pink's Autonomy, Mastery, and Purpose. If you're not familiar with that, jump onto YouTube and type in Pink Drive, D-R-I-V-E, Pink Drive. There are 2 talks that will come up. One is his TED Talk. Don't listen to that. It's good, but it's not as good. One is a 10-minute animated video. It's a little bit not dated, but it's older, but it's fantastic. So that's where autonomy and flexibility come from. And then to be able what they do best every single day. That goes back to our strengths. So I started this conversation by saying that the unified theory of everything people is a holistic model to help you attract, hire, and retain the right people, and that the key to employee retention is one-to-one meetings between direct reports and managers. The foundation for these one-to-ones are these 9 currencies of choice. But everybody has different priorities, and their priorities within these 9 currencies may change. So in 2014, what I did is I put together a conversational roadmap. That's the Mind Reading for Managers program. And I wrapped 5 topics of conversation: feedback, objectives, career development, underlying motivators, and strengths. I wrapped those 5 topics of conversation around these 9 currencies of choice. And that's what I encourage my clients to use as the foundation for their one-to-ones. The beauty of this is, as I said before, the one-to-ones need to strike the balance between the needs of the organization and the needs of the individual. The objectives conversation is the needs of the organization. The needs of the individual are the feedback, career development, underlying motivators, and strengths conversations. If you use the currencies of choice, if you wrap these 5 conversational topics around it, which I now call the 5 focused conversations, because focus is an acronym that stands for the title of the conversation. If you use these topics of conversation for your monthly one-to-ones, you will know yourself better, because if you choose to use the program, we've got exercises, but you don't need to use the program. You just need to understand these topics of conversation and how to have them with your staff. You'll be able to know yourself better. You'll be able to know your team better, and you'll be able to accomplish anything. The results that we've had are outstanding. Komatsu, the heavy equipment driver operator, the IT manager for Komatsu, just shared with me, they've been using the currencies of choice in the 5 focus conversations for 4 years. And they've said that as a result of that, their last employee engagement score was 23 points higher than the rest of the company. I could go on and on with case studies, but I won't in the interest of time. So, ladies and gentlemen, you want to utilize these currencies of choice. And I'll drill a little bit deeper in the 3 minutes that we have left to talk about how to bring this to life. And you have a copy of the slides, so feel free to use this framework. One of the things that we do in the career development conversation, which is, remember, the #1 conversation that we need to have globally for employee engagement, I use what I call the 5-step career development process. And I really bring to bear all of my experience managing or helping people manage their careers when I was a recruitment consultant. The first thing that we need to do is we need to help people get into an emotionally neutral state of mind. Now, what does that mean? I'll demonstrate by giving you an example. I had a career coaching client come to me. Her name is Jane. She wanted to throw the baby out with the bathwater because she was getting so stressed out in her job, a job she'd been in for 17 years in an industry that she'd worked in for 26. But about a year prior to our conversation, she decided that she needed to change not only jobs, but completely industries. After doing a little bit of work with her and figuring out what was bugging her, what we determined was that she was sitting under a very bright light, which was giving her migraine headaches. She didn't need to change jobs. She didn't need to change industries. All she needed to do is change desks. So what we would encourage you to do is about once or twice a year, talk to your staff about those little niggling frustrations. Again, give them the voice. Let them freely tell you what's bugging them so that you can fix it quickly and easily before it blows up into something that causes them to make a decision that they may regret and that you might regret as they walk out the door. So after you get them into an emotionally state of mind, we need to understand their strengths. That's a way of bringing them along on the journey to solve this critical skills shortage that we're going to be facing in the next few years, that we're facing right now. Understand and evaluate what they value. Talk to them about what they really need in a job and a career. Ensure their professional goals align with their personal goals and help them stay resilient. Using these currencies of choice and the mind reading for managers 5 focused conversations as the basis for their one-to-ones, First Mortgage reduced their employee turnover from 30%, which they'd gotten to through the spot on hiring, to 22%. And I just talked to the HR manager last week. It's now down to 8%. So they've done an amazing job in an industry where their average is 37%. So amazing. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our conversation. This is the unified theory of everything people. Start with target-rich objectives, 5 or fewer outcomes with measurable results written in real language. Determine the strengths that you need for the people to successfully achieve those target-rich objectives. Hire for those, along with a values alignment, attracting the right people with your purpose, and then get out of the way. Allow the people that you've hired to achieve their target-rich objectives in the best way that they know how, and support them and coach them when they need it. Be their cheerleader when they do things well. Structure monthly one-to-ones around these currencies of choice. We will give you free gifts. And before we break up for a few questions, if you want to take a deeper dive, if you found this valuable, see Elise at Meeting School about the Mind Reading for Managers digital on-demand program that delves more deeply into the currencies of choice and the 5 focused conversations, and see me directly about anything around hiring. So we've got a couple of minutes for questions, and then I know Elise wants to break up into a short little activity for the last. So anybody have any questions?
Yeah, so I will release my short little activity time. And for those of you who I know will be drifting away, let me make sure that you understand what happens next. So after this call, we would love feedback. We have a feedback form there. We will be ending email with the recording, the audio transcripts, a copy of this packet, all of these things shortly. And then we have some more events coming up in the future, and you can see that there. And then I think, Kim, we should stick on and answer questions for as long as we are willing to answer questions.
Absolutely.
So I saw a question in there from Nellie. Is anybody else have a question that they would love to get off their chest at the moment?
Oh, Wisconsin.
So Nellie asks a question about salary increases, and raising salaries through merit increases. How it's a slow process. Do you have comments on that?
Sally, do you mind unmuting yourself and
Nellie, I think.
Nellie, sorry.
Yeah,
you said Sally.
So Kim, as you know, when people take on a new role or a new position, sometimes they don't negotiate their salaries, and not knowing what their value is, they'll take the job. Then they get in the role and realize that, oh my gosh, my median salary, I'm like less of that.
Yeah.
And so you said, make sure you pay people enough to get that discussion off the table. But when you can't, because it's a very slow process, if you're trying to do pay parity or, through merit increases,
Yeah.
it's a very long process. And promotions are not an everyday occurrence anymore like they were,
Yeah.
when I started my careers. That's just almost not existent today.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with people like that and keep them engaged? And especially if they're top talent.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that in a couple of different ways. So for instance, first thing is if you're looking for a job, make sure that you know your worth. Go on to Monster, go on to Seek, go on to the job boards, Indeed, whatever job board is in your area, and look at ads. Talk to recruitment consultants that you trust and find out what your market worth is, which has nothing to do with what you're being paid now. What is your market worth for the role that you're considering, and understand what your value is. Then do the same thing when you are working in the organization. Now, for managers, and I'm going to say something really controversial, especially post-COVID, because there are companies that just will not be able to afford to do this. So a couple things. My philosophy around compensation is a simple one. Pay what market demands. What tends to happen is we hire people, we give them incremental increases. Meanwhile, the market's going like this. So there's a real pay parity issue, Nellie. You're dead right. There's a real pay parity issue. We pay what market demands for absolutely every resource. And I don't like to think of human beings as resources, but in this context, they are. For everything that goes into supplying our service or making our good, we have to pay market rate, with the exception of talent. But we have to change our philosophy around that. We have to keep up with the market, not stupid artificial bubbles, but with the market. Sometimes that's not practical. Sometimes that is impossible. This is where the currencies of choice and the one-to-ones come in really handy, because if you understand what they absolutely want to achieve in their career, understand their strengths, help unlock those and live up to their true potential, you will be able to keep people longer than they probably should stay with you by providing things that are not based on compensation. I've seen it happen over and over and over again. So I see a few more questions in here. Elise, have you been keeping track of the questions?
Yeah, so Betsy asks, how do you as a manager address staff burnout or that's not due to the job or role? And I would probably extend that to a number of feedback, objective, performance-related things that are not part of what's going on at the workplace.
Yeah. So burnout is a real thing, especially in this day and age. So again, we have to walk a fine line as managers. We have to acknowledge and pay attention to our employees, our team's mental health. And it's a big deal these days. And at the same time, we cannot be counselors. That's not our job. We are not trained to be counselors. Well, unless we are. There are some on this call that probably are, but we're not, the vast majority of managers aren't trained to be counselors. So we need to be very, very careful about how we handle it. What we can do is we can, again, through the monthly check-ins, through the one-to-ones, find out how they're going. One of the exercises in the Mind Reading for Managers program is a productivity versus well-being matrix. Simple exercise. I stole it from a client who stole it from the internet. I have no idea who to credit it to, but it's a quadrant system where you rate yourself on productivity versus well-being. And where you rate yourself isn't nearly as important as the conversation that you develop when you talk to your staff member about where they rate themselves. So get into the discussion, put your finger on the pulse, look for those signs, look for that sign of burnout. If you see it, get help, get professional help to support that staff member. Give them the time off if they need it. I know in the States, that's not something that we do as frequently as we do here in Australia, but give pay attention to it and get them the help that they need. All right. Any other questions? I think Betsy's was the last in the chat box. Does anybody else want to unmute themselves? I've got all the time in the world. It's a 4-day holiday here, so.
And it's like what, 7 a.m. for you now? You're like, you're just waking up.
It's 7:30. I can stay here through Monday if you'd like me to. That's not quite true, because my partner and I are going to the Royal Easter Show, which is like a big state fair. So we didn't have that last year due to COVID. We get to have it this year because we've been really good with COVID over the last year. So we're looking forward to it. But seriously, unmute yourself. Let's have a chat.
And that sounds like a reward system for being so good last year.
It is, let me tell you, all of our, and I know I'm not the only one, everybody is in the same boat. All of our regular things that we do, we have festivals that we go to and, parties that we go to, those were all canceled in 2020. So this is the first thing on our schedule, big event on our schedule in over a year. So we're really looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
Anybody else?
Those of you who are still here, does anybody have a quick takeaway that they want to share before we head out? I would love to hear one thing that really stuck with you and potentially an appreciation. What about you, John? What was the one thing that popped for you?
I really like the concept of outcomes, because we are teaching, and I'm on the sales side, so we're teaching sales professionals not to sell based on features and benefits and products, but we're teaching them to have conversations with customers about outcomes, because in our world, and I'm in the technology space, customers don't care what the technology is. They care about what the outcomes are going to be, what are the business impact and results. So this makes a lot of sense to me to talk to employees in the same fashion that we're thinking about our customers. Really
Great.
like that.
Excellent.
Thanks, Nellie. What about you, Lee? I saw that you unmuted.
Yeah, I mean, so much of that stuck out. It's very live for a client that I've got right at this point in time so I'm self-employed, and I, as an example, wrote a job description to show them what I am, who I am.
Oh, good for you.
And I was trying to evidence it, knowing that this was coming up, which is why I signed on at such short notice to come to this. But it was, I think, yeah, to shorten it and make it outcome based, but also in my mind, the projects were trying to tie projects back to things like OKRs. And I think that it just now all aligns, that there's confidence and language around how to explain that to them. So yeah, that's my takeaway, actually, that seeing where it fits and that the models align with other things to fill in the rest of it.
Excellent.
Nice. Thank you. John.
Oh, I appreciated the kind of holistic nature of the framework that pulls it all together. And probably for me, the one piece that I took away strongly was the importance of a compelling purpose. It's not just a bouncer, but an attractant for people.
Yeah.
So.
Excellent. Excellent. Any comments on the currencies of choice or the focused conversations, using those for your one-on-ones?
I think for me, I have to really digest them. I have to really dig down into a little bit deeper and really digest them, and then figure out how do I need them, weave them into the conversations.
Yep.
Leilania, do you have a takeaway for us?
I'm kind of like Nellie in that I'm looking to how to take those focus points and pull them into the conversations I'm already having. So I'm kind of melding that in my head right now.
Excellent. Yeah. What tends to happen if you're already having one-to-one conversations, what tends to happen is that managers tend to focus on one of the two endpoints of a continuum. So one endpoint is business as usual, KPIs, OKRs, KRAs, what do they need to do, which is absolutely critical. That's the needs of the organization. Those are those target-rich objectives, outcome-based objectives. And then the other endpoint to the continuum is, so how are you doing? How are things? Which has its place, absolutely. We talked about empathy earlier on. We need to find out how they are. We need to find out what's going on in their lives as much as they'll share with us. But it's the bit in the middle. And the bit in the middle are the currencies of choice. The bit in the middle will help you uncover what their career aspirations are, what they have to say, giving them a voice. The bit in the middle will help them drill deeper into their strengths and how to spend more time actually working in the areas of their strengths, which is the #1 key to success, according to research. It'll help you uncover what they're motivated by, why they'll volunteer to go the extra mile, to go 120%. It's that bit in the middle where the magic happens. So if you already are having one-to-one check-ins with your staff, keep on doing it. It is the key to success. But don't forget that bit in the middle, because those conversations are so rich and they are so productive. They will help you develop that really deep connection with your team. And as we saw in the beginning of the masterclass with those research studies, it's the connection that helps you have a team that is happy, motivated, and profitable.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining and for sticking around with us. We will see you at a future event, I hope. But
You bet.
For now, have a great, wonderful evening, morning, day, whichever part of the world you happen to be in, and enjoy it with everything you've got. So we'll see you all later. All right.
Thank you,
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.